Chapter 13, The Public Scandal. The front page of the Manila Bulletin hit the mahogany desk of Senator Gabriel Velasco with a heavy slap. The headline was printed in inescapable black ink. The cartel's banker, leaked casino dividends tie Senate leaders to Tonda syndicate. Below the headline was a high-definition photograph of Senator Velasco sitting in the VIP room of the Entertainment City Casino. Sitting directly across from him, clearly handing over a silver briefcase, was Mateo Reyes. To the public, Mateo was the heavily hunted face of the newly revealed BGC drug trade. Senator Velasco stared at the paper, the color draining from his face that his skin looked like parchment. "How?" Velasco whispered, his voice trembling. He looked up at his chief of staff, who was pacing frantically across the senator's private office. "I demanded discretion. Mr. Liu swore those junket rooms were an impenetrable fortress." "It wasn't Mr. Liu," the chief of staff shot back, dropping a heavy tablet onto the desk. The screen played a viral news clip repeating the photos on a continuous loop. It was Agent Navarro. The NBI raided an offshore accounting firm in Macau last night. They didn't just find photographs, Senator. They found the routing ledgers. They have a direct, documented paper trail of 300 million pesos moving from Mateo Reyes's ghost companies into your campaign re-election fund. Velasco felt his chest tighten, a cold sweat breaking out across the back of his neck. Just a week ago, he was considered a front-runner for the vice presidency. Now, the president of the Philippines had just declared martial law against the cartels on national television, ordering shoot-on-sight commands. And Velasco's face was suddenly splashed across the digital landscape, inextricably linked to the very cartel the president was actively hunting. His private phone on the desk vibrated violently. It was an encrypted number. Velasco stared at it like it was a live grenade. He already knew who was calling. Marco Dizon. He didn't pick it up. He let it buzz until it finally timed out. "The media is encamped outside the subdivision gates," the chief of staff warned, checking his own buzzing phone. "The Department of Justice is drafting a subpoena for your banking records. If they officially connect you to the port smuggling routes, the president won't just fire you. He'll order the military to drag you out of this office in zip ties." Velasco stood up, walking toward his private bar. His hands shook so violently he dropped a heavy crystal glass, shattering it against the hardwood floor. He ignored the shards, grabbing a bottle of scotch and drinking directly from the neck. The burning liquor did nothing to stop the rising panic. Mateo Reyes was a weapon from the slums. He offered incredible wealth, but he brought catastrophic, uncontrollable violence too close to the sun. Marco had promised that the political shield would protect them both, but Marco had fundamentally misunderstood the political food chain in Manila. Politicians did not fall on their swords for gangsters. When the ship started sinking, the politicians simply threw the gangsters into the ocean. "We need a firewall," Velasco rasped, slamming the empty bottle onto the desk. "We need to sever the connection before Navarro officially files the subpoena." "How?" his chief of staff asked, exasperated. "The NBI knows Mateo Reyes bribed you. They have the photographs." "They have photographs of a meeting," Velasco corrected, his political survival instincts violently kicking in. "They don't have a sworn confession. If Mateo Reyes testifies in federal court, I am dead." He turned to his chief of staff, his eyes hardening into a desperate, reptilian glare. "But if Mateo Reyes dies violently in a police raid before he ever sees the inside of a courtroom, the paper trail becomes circumstantial. A dead gang boss cannot testify against a sitting senator." The chief of staff froze, understanding the terrifying magnitude of the order. "You want me to leak his location to the NBI?" "No," Velasco sneered, his voice dropping into a lethal, hushed tone. "Navarro wants to arrest him so he can put him on a witness stand. I don't want an arrest. I want a slaughter." Velasco walked back to his desk, stepping over the shattered glass. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a very specific, highly restricted number belonging to the commander of the Metro Manila SWAT Division, a commander whose pension fund Velasco personally bankrolled. "Commander," Velasco said smoothly when the line connected, expertly faking the tone of a deeply concerned public servant. "I have just received an anonymous, highly credible tip regarding the escalating cartel violence in the city." "Senator," the SWAT commander replied cautiously. "The NBI is handling the Reyes manhunt. The NBI is moving too slowly, and the president demands absolute, instantaneous results," Velasco pushed, turning the political screws. "I am giving you the exact coordinates of Mateo Reyes's heavily fortified secondary safe house in Tagaytay. He is armed. He is extremely dangerous. And my sources tell me he has sworn to shoot any officer who breaches the perimeter." Velasco paused, letting the fabricated severity of the threat sink in. "You do not execute an arrest warrant, Commander," Velasco ordered coldly. "You execute a military strike. Leave absolutely no survivors. Do we understand each other?" "Understood, Senator," the commander replied. "We are scrambling the tactical teams now." Velasco hung up the phone. He looked down at the newspaper on his desk, his own face staring back at him. He had just condemned Mateo Reyes and Marco Dizon to a violent, inescapable death. "Call the press pool," Velasco told his chief of staff, straightening his immaculate tie, seamlessly sliding back into his public persona. "Tell them I am holding an emergency press conference to violently condemn the corruption in the ports. I want to be on national television advocating for the death penalty right as the SWAT teams tear Mateo Reyes apart." At 11 p.m., while Senator Velasco was silently orchestrating their execution under the guise of an emergency press conference, Marco Dizon was actively bleeding out on a private baccarat table. The ultra-VIP room at the Entertainment City Casino was suffocatingly quiet, entirely insulated from the flashing neon chaos of the main gambling floor. The only sounds in the luxuriously appointed suite were the soft clinking of high-denomination chips and the crisp, methodical snap of playing cards. Marco was entirely unhinged. His bespoke midnight blue suit jacket was crumpled carelessly on the floor. His silk tie was violently loosened, and his designer shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He had been playing for 3 straight hours, sweating profusely and drinking heavily from a bottle of scotch he refused to let the waitress pour. Across the green velvet table sat a stoic, silver-haired Chinese shipping magnate who had barely spoken a single word all night. Marco violently shoved a massive, disorganized tower of rectangular platinum chips into the center of the table. "Another 15 million, he snapped, his voice hoarse, his eyes bloodshot and manic. "Keep dealing." The dealer, a deeply terrified woman in a crisp casino uniform, hesitated. Her hands hovered over the shoe. She looked past Marco toward the shadows of the room, seeking permission. Mateo stood quietly in the corner, leaning against the dark mahogany-paneled wall. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't playing. He was just watching the spectacular, catastrophic implosion of his partner. "Marco," Mateo said softly, his voice devoid of any judgment, carrying only cold, clinical observation. "That's 80 million down tonight. The NBI is auditing our ledgers in Macau. We need this liquid capital. I am the capital." Marco roared, suddenly slamming his fists onto the velvet table with explosive violence. The dealer physically jumped backward. Marco pointed a trembling, sweat-slicked finger directly at Mateo. "I built this entire empire from nothing. I own the customs docks. I own the senators. And I own the luck. I don't lose, Teo. I never lose." He turned aggressively back to the terrified dealer, his face flushed red with terrifying hubris. "Deal the cards." The dealer swallowed hard and smoothly turned the cards. A natural 8 for the shipping magnate. Marco desperately overturned his own cards. A 4. And a face card. Another immediate, devastating loss. 15 million pesos vanished in 5 seconds. Marco stared at the cards, his face rapidly draining of all color. His chest heaved as his mind desperately tried to rationalize the failure. He reached for his scotch, his hand shaking so violently that he knocked the crystal glass over. The amber liquid slowly spilled across the expensive velvet, staining the table. Mateo watched the liquor drip onto the plush carpet. He felt no anger, just a chilling, profound clarity. Marco Dizon, the sophisticated, untouchable mastermind of the Manila underworld, was gone. The blistering heat of the federal government, the absolute paranoia, and the sheer weight of their own terrifying success had finally shattered him. He was no longer a king. He was just an addict desperately chasing a high he could never catch again. Mateo pushed off the wall and walked slowly over to the table. He gently placed a hand on Marco's trembling shoulder. "We're leaving," Mateo said quietly. "We're going back to the novice. Now." Marco didn't fight him. He stared blankly at the stained velvet. All the aggressive fire suddenly drained from his eyes, leaving only a hollow, terrifying emptiness. The empire was collapsing, and the architect had completely lost his mind.